All right, you're listening to On Deck, presented by Amazing Med Zone. I'm Phil from Shirley with my boys, Druminati82 and Drodo from Amazing Med Zone. Shout
What
out to everybody who's been listening, supporting us, sharing our stuff. There's so many people I want to thank, especially everybody at Amazing Med Zone. Thank you guys. We're going to do a little list right now. Top five favorite matches of our lives. WWF, could be WCW, ECW, could be whatever. But for me, number five jumps out right away. The first ladder match that I ever got to see, and it was Razor Ramon versus Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 10. My number five match. I was blown away. Both those guys were just amazing. For me, number five, Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels.
Oh, it's so crazy because that was my number five, and I just took it off. I literally took it off like seconds ago because
Love it.
I had another one on the list. But that match is the first ladder match. It wasn't like crazy. It wasn't like too much going on, but it was just the fact that there was a ladder in the ring, and those both those guys sold it big time. But my number five is Bret the Hitman Hart versus Stone Cold, WrestleMania 13. It was just crazy. It was a double turn, the animosity. You thought these guys really hated each other. You know, a shit talker and a technical wrestler. It was just such a good match. So that's my number five, Bret versus Stone Cold.
Of that. I'm going number five for me would have been back in 2012. That was The Rock versus John Cena. So that was tough for me because it was growing up loving The Rock and then John Cena becoming your favorite wrestler and watching the two of them like battle of the eras in a weird way. So that's definitely the first one on my list.
Love it. Love it. For me, my number four is a match that it wasn't the best match, but just the way the crowd was, and it was two legends and icons. WrestleMania 18, The Rock versus Hollywood Hulk Hogan at that time, and we get the turn where he goes back to the yellow and red. I felt like the crowd was insane. That's a match I love to watch, just to watch the crowd. Hulk Hogan versus The Rock, WrestleMania 18, my number four.
A great match. A great match. That was like Hogan's downturn, but at the same time, like he put his all into that match. My number four, I know this is my last one with Bret the Hitman Hart, but it was Bret versus Owen, the Hearts
Mm.
versus Hearts. I mean, that match was crazy. The fact that Owen won too was so cool. Um, it was like watching two brothers just beat the shit out of each other in their garage. You know, like it was just such a cool match. But yeah, my number four is gonna be Bret versus Owen Hart. R.I.P. Rest in peace, Owen Hart. But yeah, that was an epic match for me.
That is great. Yeah, the impact that that had. People don't even understand. Like people don't watch wrestling enough. But when you start following the storylines, you realize how big of a deal that was
Oh
back
yeah,
in the day. My number four, another deep storyline was back when Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero were having that beef back in the day before, rest in peace Eddie Guerrero, of course. But that match was insane to me.
yeah.
When they finally went head to head. So solid number four for me.
Yeah, I think there was like I think if Ray lost the match, you had to give up his mask forever or something like that. Like, it was
He had to like take the mask off, and then there were, like the wives were involved, and there was so much going on back
that
then.
was
I
a great.
love that we don't. I love that we don't talk about our list at all before we record because my number three is that I quit match between Bret Hart and Stone Cold at WrestleMania 13. I feel like to me at that point, that's when Stone Cold was already starting to get that big push and becoming a good guy. But I felt like after that match was really where it got crazy, and I feel like it also was a turn, like you said, for Bret Hart, where he started being hated, where he was the baby face always. So for me, that match jumps out, and plus it was an amazing match. I'll never forget it. Ken Shamrock, special guest referee. Number
Oh,
three, Stone Cold versus Bret Hart.
yeah. At number three for me, I don't know how this isn't my number one, but Undertaker versus Mick Foley, Hell in the Cell. Uh,
Ah,
it's just like one of those matches that you can watch all the time. I get goosebumps watching it. Taker just throwing Mankind off of the cell, and the match is continuing. And you're just like, how the fuck is this guy taking a beating like this and still going? My original number three was going to be Mick Foley versus Terry Funk, and like pick the match, right? Like there's so many good matches against these guys, but I try to keep it like WWF. So yeah, Taker versus Mick Foley was Hell in the Cell. It was legendary.
That's yeah. Those were the days. That whole Attitude Era, like WCW days, were just like the greatest. Number three, I might get some hate here from you fellas. I might get some hate. But more recently, I gotta put this Roman Reigns versus Cody Rhodes that just happened at WrestleMania this year with the Bloodline and The Rock coming back and the Tribal Chief craziness. I gotta that's like an all time story. I gotta
I love it.
throw that on there.
Great, man. That was a great match. Great storyline. Great build up. Like I love those two. That's a great match.
Yeah, CM Punk being out and hurt, so Cody Rhodes kind of stepped in and
Yep.
finished his story. All time.
It's crazy. Just going back of whatever number three is, my number two, Drew. You're killing me with this. Just beating me to the punch every time. Mankind versus the Undertaker, the Hell in the Cell at the King of the Ring. To me, that could be my number one. Just the wow moments in that. To me, that's where Mick Foley became God at that point. You know, after taking those bumps, from like I went to his Hall of Fame induction because of shit like that. Like, he is one of my favorite wrestlers because of that night. You know, he's a legend. Mick Foley, Mankind, Cactus Jack, Dude Love, whatever we want to call him, versus the Undertaker that night. Number two.
Yeah. 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 My number two, it's hard not to put these two guys in my top matches. The Rock and Stone Cold, WrestleMania 17. Stone Cold links up with Vince McMahon, which you never thought was going to happen. All right, Stone Cold kind of turns heel a little bit, even though like he was always teetering that line. I just think that was like peak Attitude Era, like those two fighting. Like there's like Godzilla versus King Kong. You know, it was like those two names, the Rock and Stone Cold, like are like my biggest inspirations for watching wrestling at that time. So to see them wrestle and like the fact that the way that the match went was insane. And like I said, nobody thought he was going to be Vince McMahon's buddy. He beat the shit out of him every week on Raw, and then he aligns himself with it just to beat The Rock is nuts. So yeah, number two for me is Rock versus Stone Cold, Mania 17.
You just had me do an immediate lateral. I just did an immediate lateral because that was on my list prior, that exact match. Since we covered it, my number two is going to be when John Cena faced JBL in the I Quit match back in WrestleMania 21, I want to say it was at the time. That was when John Cena won the WWE Championship for the first time. Then he came out with the spinner belt and like completely just changed the game in there. So that was a crazy match and a crazy storyline. JBL was all corporate. John Cena was like the thug coming in out of nowhere. So that one hits the heart for me for sure.
This top five was, one of the hardest ones for me. I was just going through so many matches. There was Royal Rumbles where I wanted to put on there where I just thought it was so stacked, like the 92 Rumble. But for me, the number one match that jumps out to me, a match that I always want to watch, I'll never turn it off whenever I see it. And you could go either one. It's the triple threat TLC match between the Dudley Boys, the Hardy Boys, and Edge and Christian. To me, that's one of the greatest matches. There's so many insane wow moments where you're like, is this guy going to kill himself? Like, what are they doing? So for me, number one, TLC, you can go with one or two. Two's probably got a little more crazier moments, but the first one, it's always hard to be better than the first one. But I'll put either one. One or two is number one for me.
Yeah, that was like a high flying, crazy, like just you had it all in that match, right? Like it was just one of those matches. Like you said, I know it was a 3-way, but still, that match was insane. It was insane. My number one is Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, WrestleMania 25. Just crazy moves. Rivalry going into it. The audience was like electric. Those two guys were, at a time where like you didn't think they could be wrestling this way, and they were just they put on a show. Like in my mind, that's like hands down the best wrestling match I've seen. Like you said, this list was like almost impossible for me because there was so many matches I left off. But at the same time, I feel like I couldn't not put that on my list.
100%. The streak, you know what I mean? The streak, and there was a couple times at that point you thought it was over. So yeah, no, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, all time great match. Anytime you have Undertaker at WrestleMania, like we all pretty much knew how it was actually going to end, but man, Was it a ride? Like you would think like back then that you're like, oh, if anyone could take him out, it's going to be Shawn Michaels. So
Right.
that was just two absolute superstars too. So it's hard to pick a side in that. It's like you go Undertaker because of respect, you go Shawn Michaels because you can't not love the guy. Like it was tough. My number one, my favorite wrestling feud of possibly all time, was The Rock and Triple H. So I'm
Nice.
taking it back to SummerSlam in '98. The Rock versus
98.
Triple H.
Yep, yep.
They finally go head to head. Absolutely epic back in the 90s. It was kind of no holds barred, whatever could be put on TV back then. All time great match. And of course, The Rock being The Rock made the people happy. He's the people's champion for a reason, you know?
100%. Anything in the heart of the Attitude Era, I feel like, right? We all like gravitate to that. Another great show. Love it. We want to hear your comments we want to see your comments in the comments. Give us your top 5 matches. Let us know what we missed. Roast us on some. Tell us if you agree. Like I said, great having you, Joe. Shout out to everybody who's been supporting us. We can't thank you enough. Thanks for listening. We'll be back with more.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, guys. Love it.